catalogue of lies or dropping truths. In my view, it's the same script of lies. Policymakers have lost the ability to reason, literally sold their countries for a song. Or should I say, the ability to reason has been overtaken by greed. Do you care for some truthful journalism? What happened to human rights, freedom of speech, free to choose what you want and what you don't want? Did you just cut me off?
What is government doing about that?
Did they just cut me off?
Blacks should
At what point did they cut me off? Lest I remind you, we are at war. Well, this is Worldview. Welcome to the show and thank you for joining me. I'm Yvonne Katsande. All right, so it is still top headline in South Africa, the relations, or should I say the strained relations between South Africa and America, and of course including Russia. The Americans are still pushing an agenda trying to squeeze South Africa out of breath to not have good relations with Russia. But listen, again, as I've been saying on the show, we've got a BRICS summit coming up in Johannesburg, and all media houses lead to the BRICS. Well, of course, media houses that know what they're doing, I suppose, will be going to BRICS Summit to actually cover the BRICS Summit. So we're all waiting for that. But I think the bigger question is, would President Putin be coming to South Africa? And I'm sure you also want to know. So today it's a very interesting program because I'll be joined on the show by the Russian ambassador to South Africa, that is Ambassador Ilya Rogachev. I will introduce him in a moment. Now, on 11th May 2023, the United States ambassador to South Africa, Ruben Brigetti, claimed that South Africa had secretly exported arms to Russia in December of 2022. Now, the announcement rapidly fed into a popular narrative that South Africa was increasingly siding with Russia in relation to Moscow's aggressive war in Ukraine. Brigetti's statements made both South African and international news headlines, including the Wall Street Journal, CNN, and Financial Times. Not that they matter anyway, but anyway, it did make headlines. And he asserted that, based on the United States intelligence reports, ammunition and/or arms were furtively loaded onto a Russian cargo vessel, the Lady R, at South Africa's naval base in Simonstown. Now, the vessel had earlier been sanctioned by the United States government, and in response, the South African presidency denied that the government had granted a permit for such arms or ammunition to be exported to Russia, and that no permit approval for Russian arms exports appears in South Africa's National Conventional Arms Control Committee, the recent arms export reports, and other than for electronic observation equipment, annual arms export reports. Nonetheless, President Cyril Ramaphosa is in the process of establishing a commission of inquiry into the incident. Now, Ambassador Brigetti rejected the charge of Naledi Pandor, Minister of International Relations, without naming her, that the United States bullies African governments. Rather, it must act in its own interests. Well, he said, as an example, that the United States AGOA, African Growth and Opportunity Act, which lowers tariff barriers, has a clause stating that no recipient of the AGOA benefits shall do anything in direct conflict with the national interests of the United States. We all know what that means, right? And thereby define the problem that Dr. Pandor had addressed. Now, by mentioning the AGOA, he indicated that the United States could terminate South Africa's AGOA and PEPFAR benefits. Now, the same America has been threatening different countries to remove aid who do not support the LGBTQ agenda and many more other things. I want you to listen to Ambassador Brigetti's speech.
The arming of Russia by South Africa with the vessel that landed in Simonstown is fundamentally unacceptable. We are confident that weapons were loaded onto that vessel, and I would bet my life on the accuracy of that assertion. Our officials reiterated our respect for South Africa's policy of neutrality and non-alignment in international affairs. And yet they noted a series of issues which suggest that in practice, the government of South Africa is in fact not aligned. Amongst the things that we noted were the docking of the Russian cargo ship Lady R in Simonstown between December 6th and December 8th, 2022, which we are confident uploaded weapons, ammunition onto that vessel in Simonstown as it made its way back to Russia. That there has been a precedent set under South African constitutional law domestically following the failure to arrest Omar Bashir when he was indicted by the ICC and he came to South Africa for the AU summit in 2015. And so as we look at this situation from a distance, we do not understand what's there to debate about. The legal precedents seem to be clear and multitudinous.
All right, so in all this, hullabaloo, misunderstanding and strained relationships, the South African economy obviously is bearing the brunt of this. Last week, the South African rand fell to an all-time low of 19 rand and 52 cents against the United States dollar following this spate. Now, Brigadiers' comments placed U.S.-South African relationships on the rocks and added more negative sentiment to the economy. Last week, the Fraser Institute annual survey of mining companies of 2022 placed South Africa for the second consecutive year in the bottom 10 global mining jurisdictions. The Minerals Council South Africa says that this is a serious cause for concern. The organization explained that the survey captures the mining industry's perceptions of the investment potential of global mining jurisdictions based on mineral potential and government policies. South African citizens have voiced their opinions on social media, demanding that he be sanctioned because of the socio-economic harm his actions have caused the country. Now, to help me talk more about the diplomatic relations amongst these three countries, South Africa, United States, and Russia, joining me via video call is Ambassador Ilya Rogachev, who is the Russian ambassador to South Africa. Ambassador Ilya, thank you so much for joining me on the program. And once again, it's good to see you, sir.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. Well, so you are in South Africa, and I'm sure you've been watching and hearing as the spate continues between South Africa, United States, and of course, Russia is literally being blamed for everything. Now we are talking about Lady R. My first question to you is this: does Lady Russia Gate, Lady R, make sense at all?
It is a commercial vehicle. It is under sanctions, yes, because allegedly it delivered some weapons, sometimes to somebody. I don't know what was exactly the reason to put it on the sanctions list by some Western countries, but it has very little to do with the Russian state as such. So it is pretty much difficult to talk about that particular vehicle.
So as it stands right now, Russia does not recognize Lady R and any transportation of weapons between South Africa and Russia.
Well, it is a commercial vehicle, first. Secondly, why would we import weapons from South Africa? The type of weaponry, the types of weaponry and caliber of ammunitions do not coincide in our countries. We are 100% technically different. We do not need any arms from South Africa. As far as I know, by the way, the Lady R was still calling from one port into another and has not since then returned to Russia. So, I mean, I see very little signs of Russia, if any, buying weapons and importing weapons from or ammunition from South Africa. My distinguished colleague, Ambassador Brigitte, bet his life on it, so he must know something maybe better than I do or than the South African government does.
You know what, Ambassador Ilya, you've just given me the most interesting comment to this question. You know, I'm just, my mind is racing when you say that Russia doesn't actually need arms from South Africa. Very interesting. And I'm asking myself, so who informed Ambassador Brigati? You're very right. He might need to answer this. But could it be Denel involved maybe in supplying these weapons, if at all, since the SANDF does not even have enough for its own personnel to begin with?
Well, right. I mean that, for example, if you take big guns, heavy artillery, we in Russia use 152 millimeter caliber. South Africa produces only 155 millimeter shells. So it's a different caliber, it's different standard. South African military mostly equipped with Western arms products, with Western materiel de guerre, not Russian. So there are very little exchanges possible, in fact.
Wow. All right. Now, you know, this whole spate started off because, you know, the United States is definitely bitter that Russia seems to be winning, you know, popularity amongst a lot of African countries. Now, let's even look at the BRICS. The BRICS blocks has about 30 more countries that are actually waiting to be admitted in BRICS. And South Africa this year, come August, is actually hosting the BRICS summit. And definitely that has ruffled feathers. Now, do you think that the United States will succeed in sanctioning South Africa in the Russian weapons dispute, given that there's no evidence even that there were weapons that were even supplied?
Well, I think that the United States is looking for a pretext to interfere somehow into this. And this is why this démarche over an alleged delivery of weapons and ammunition to Russia took place at all. There is no proof, of course, to that. But we also know that our American former partners are very good at fabricating and inventing all kinds of pretexts for war, casus belli, for introducing sanctions, or for something else, you know, for pressuring other states and governments. The story goes back by dozens of years, and I can cite a lot of examples, and the so-called the Gulf of Tonkin episode, which gave a pretext to begin the war in Vietnam, and also infamous episode in the UN Security Council, when former Secretary of State Colin Powell showed to the world this small glass container, presumably with some weapon of mass destruction. Perhaps chemical weapon, it was meant. And that was a pretext to invade Iraq. I just wonder, and I have always wondered, if that was a weapon of mass destruction, how did he smuggle this container into the UN HQ?
Yeah.
With all the dozens and perhaps hundreds of VIPs that are there. So was it reckless or move, or was it something else in the container? Perhaps, you know, so some home powder, I don't know, washing powder. Anyway, the pretexts are being invented if they are needed, and maybe this is a pretext to exercise some pressure on South Africa, on South African public opinion, South African government. This is what I think about it, the reasons and causes of all of this.
Wow. So the intended goal here would be to what? Break the relations and the ties between South Africa and Russia so that South Africa maybe is forced out of the BRICS? What's your take on that?
I don't think it is possible, and the goal is to break a relationship between South Africa and Russia. It will certainly not be the case. Our relationship is on a very solid foundation. We build it carefully from both sides. They are developing. They are increasing in volume. They are growing in quality. After some calm down period during the COVID-19 pandemics, now it is in full swing, I would say. And of course, South African presidency in BRICS injects new energy, additional energy into our bilateral relationship. So I don't see that this episode can really affect South African-Russian bilateral relationship.
Now, Ambassador, can I ask you the most popular question that everybody else around the world is asking? Is President Putin actually attending the BRICS summit in Johannesburg, South Africa?
Well, the invitation for BRICS leaders to attend the summit was issued quite some time ago already, and it was accepted by all leaders, as far as I know, including President Putin.
And what is your take on the stance of the ICC, calling for President Putin to actually be arrested, the United States even taking a forefront in that? United States is not even a part of the ICC. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that it is, again, one of the cases invented and one of the pretexts to complicate our bilateral relationship. But yet again, I think that this is impossible. It will not work. For us, the issue of ICC orders, arrest warrants, is pretty clear and simple from the legal point of view. We do not recognize them as valid. It might be an issue internally for the South African side, but we are confident that our partners will be perfectly capable of deciding, resolving it. South African side will decide how it wishes to handle this issue, and then we will coordinate it bilaterally. So I don't see a problem for, again, South African-Russian relationship in that.
All right, so what does it mean, though, that we have more countries that are now willing to join the BRICS, obviously disregarding the power or the hegemony of this US dollar, the use of the US dollar? What does this mean, though, for the countries in the bloc and for the countries that are actually going to join the bloc as well?
Well, I take a deep satisfaction in the fact that so many countries now, in this during this period, in this environment, wish to join BRICS. You see, our military operation in Ukraine sort of polarized political public opinion in the world. And again, it is very satisfactory that so many countries, despite all the pressure from the West to join anti-Russian sanctions, to join cancel everything Russian campaign, decided to move to the other side. And it is inspiring, and that proves that BRICS is very attractive for a number of reasons to most of the countries in the world. Because BRICS, you see, you use the word bloc. It is not an alliance. It is not military alliance. It is not an alliance. It is not an organization. Political commentators mostly use the term entity or grouping towards BRICS, because it is a new kind of entity in the future, reflecting the future multipolar, truly multipolar world. And it is built, first of all, on a mutual respect of sovereignty, mutual respect of capability taking sovereign, independent decisions, be it in the field of international affairs or in the field of internal development matters of any member state and its population. So it is a new kind of qualitatively new kind of grouping of states, and again, it is very, very telling and I think that most of political commentators somehow omit to mention that, that so many countries being under tremendous pressure, unprecedented pressure from the West to choose sides, they have chosen to join BRICS.
And it's more like what we're witnessing right now in the world, an aligning of the nations, a very interesting, situation. Would you say it is advisable for South Africa to ditch the United States for Russia? I mean, there's a whole pool, Ambassador, we can't ignore it. America is saying come aside. Russia has strong ties with South Africa. Seeing the large parts of its GDP is still under the control of the United States. And that's why you find the United States on any given Sunday, they can come up and tell South Africa that there's a security threat, which we never heard any of the other countries and their embassies and obviously their intelligence talking about it, which I found very interesting and very disturbing at the same time.
Well, I will not dare to issue prescriptions on how to conduct South African foreign policy. But of course, I can mention that our bilateral relationship with South Africa are very promising. The potential is tremendous. It is true, I refer to the argument often made these last days, that economically, for first of all, historical reasons, South Africa has closer trade ties with Western countries, Western European, United States as well, Canada. But the volume of bilateral trade is much smaller with Russia. But the potential is there, certainly. And we can do a lot together in literally every area of economic development.
Now, Ambassador Ilya, would you say that there truly was a security threat in South Africa at the time that the United States issued one?
Sorry, I didn't get it. Who was this threat to?
South Africa. There was a security threat on South Africa issued by the United States a few months ago, but no other embassy in the country spoke of it.
No, I don't want to comment on that. I think that that was a very wrong thing, very wrong move on the U.S. Embassy.
Interesting. Now, the fight for resources tends to be reciprocated with hard power, like what we're seeing happening in Sudan. In your words, is South Africa's defense strategy covering this blind side of its foreign policy?
I'm sorry, I wouldn't like to comment on this.
All right. Okay, Ambassador, before I let you go, what is the update with the war in Ukraine?
Well, I think that according to the narrative spread by the mainstream media that mostly reflect Western point of view, the whole world now is expecting a Ukrainian offensive that will supposedly finish this conflict in Ukrainian favor. Well, of course, we think that if anything will happen, then it will be quite the opposite to this prognosis. There is a number of mediation efforts, including from African countries, from South Africa in particular, that we welcome, because of course every war will end in negotiations, and it will end. So we never declined any offer of diplomatic mediation, but I have to remind our viewers that we were very, very close, the two sides, to sign a peace treaty in April, early in April last year, and this attempt was prevented, was thwarted by efforts from a third party. Then in September, President Zelensky signed a decree which prohibits Ukrainian officials to negotiate with the Russian officials while Mr. Putin is still president of the Russian Federation. And thus it precludes almost any kind of bilateral negotiations. And then there was a so-called peace plan by President Zelensky of 10 points, and each of them is absolutely unacceptable to the Russian Federation. And my impression that it was drafted with exact same intention to make it absolutely impossible to have negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. So those who offer their good services, they assume a Herculean task. I think that it will be very, very difficult to make Ukraine, to make it being inclined for peace.
Wow. Very sad situation for the citizens of Ukraine. Now, my last question to you, Ambassador.
Absolutely.
Very sad. Before I actually say my goodbyes, would you say that the American hegemony is over?
It is a process. It is a process, and we're in this process. We think that it is undoubtedly the world is moving from a unipolar world to multipolarity, that it is an objective process, that it will be developing despite our special military operation in Ukraine. It is just an episode in this transformation, global transformation. There might be some other episodes, not exactly of the military nature, which would speed up or slow down this process.
Yeah.
But it is inevitable, and people have to, start thinking otherwise. The hegemony, if not over yet, it will be over very soon. And we will be there, and people of the planet will benefit. All people of the planet will benefit from that.
Wow. Interesting times we're really living in. Like I said, once again, the aligning of the nations, just proving that the world truly is a different place, like you just said, Ambassador Ilya. Thank you so much for joining me on the program today.
Thank you.
All right, so that was the Russian ambassador to South Africa, Ambassador Ilya Rogachev, giving us comments there on his take and his thoughts on what is happening, the two-pronged war between South Africa and the United States, but of course not forgetting that Russia is very heavily involved. It has been met with a lot of comments, mixed reactions, both from political parties, ruling governments, oppositions, and even citizens of South Africa, United States, and Russia alike, giving comments on what this means for the ordinary citizens and for the governments. Now, the EFF and the SACP and other opposition political parties, they want Brigadier sent home. Just like you've heard from Ambassador Ilya, that he was a bit careless in his comments. I honestly don't know who was advising Ambassador Brigadier. My efforts to reach him have not yet been responded to, but I'm trying to get a hold of him to understand what really was happening in his mind and what was that all about in the first place. Julius Malema of the EFF tails after the CP and says that the same thing, that Brigadier must pack and go home. Kill the messenger and we will feel better? Of course not. Now have a listen as Julius Malema reacts to the escalating diplomatic tensions between America and South Africa.
Americans' concerns are misplaced. The current government has got no capacity to empower Russians with weapons against their own handlers. And that the concerns of America in relation to South Africa's posture in the war between Russia and Ukraine, it's unfounded. We've got a long-standing relationship with Russia when it was still under the Soviet Union, and that Russia has helped us to be where we are, and that will not be dictated to by USA in terms of who becomes our friends. But I don't think there's anything that we should be worried about. There's no one with such capacity in South Africa who can supply Russia with weapons. If anything, it is the other way around. And therefore, if the president says he's going to investigate, we'll hear what the outcomes are. But America is just becoming a crybaby, trying to find a way into punishing South Africa because of our position on the Russia-Ukraine war. But all equally, to put more pressure with regard to BRICS conference, because they want us not to allow President Putin to come, and now they are spreading false alarms and propaganda as an attempt to put pressure on South Africa. And we call on our government not to surrender to that pressure. President Putin is more than welcome here. The people of South Africa will protect him. Not that he doesn't have capacity to protect himself. No one in South Africa, in the whole African continent combined, has got capacity to can arrest President Putin. So we shouldn't even take chances. He must come here, have his meetings, and then leave. We must sell South Africa to BRICS. We must sell South Africa to Russia. We've got an energy crisis, and Russia is in a better place to can intervene with immediate.
All right, so that's the stand of most South Africans right now as it stands. President Putin, they say he's welcome to come to South Africa and that the BRICS conference should go right ahead with all the other countries that want to join. Very much welcome to join. Well, that's all I have time for on Worldview today. Thank you for watching. I'm back again tomorrow same time as I continue to view the world.
And sanctions against Russia are actually a warning to other countries. Look what we can do to you if you don't follow us. They're saying we'll cut you out of the global economy. We'll take such and such actions. All the actions they've read out against Russia and Putin and the so-called Russian oligarchs are actually an announcement to the whole world. They're saying, look what we're going to do to you if you don't follow us.